Ambassador Kim Tae walked slowly to the center podium in the Great Council Hall. His black uniform was neat and pressed. His face showed no emotion as he looked out at the hundreds of alien representatives sitting in curved rows around him. The massive chamber buzzed with the sounds of different species talking, clicking, humming, and making their various noises. The Vorthak crystalline beings sparkled like living diamonds as they discussed trade routes with the Kalari gas creatures who floated in special containment suits. Near the back, the reptilian Sorok delegates argued loudly about who could mine asteroids in the outer regions of space. Their forked tongues flicked in and out as they spoke in harsh, hissing voices. This was Nexus Prime, the greatest space station ever built. It served as the meeting place for over 1,000 different alien races. For 200 years, it had been the center of galactic civilization. Today, Kim Tae was about to change everything. He tapped his communication device. The translation systems built into every seat began working immediately. Whatever he said would be converted into hundreds of different languages at the same time. Honored representatives, Kim Tae said in a clear, steady voice. I stand before you today with an important announcement. Humanity is withdrawing from all galactic affairs. This decision is effective immediately. The enormous chamber fell completely silent. Even the Zilthak delegation, who never stopped their constant clicking sounds, became quiet. It was as if someone had suddenly turned off all the noise in the universe. Counselor Vex 9 of the Mechanical Collective turned his metal head toward Kim Tae. His glowing blue eyes focused on the human ambassador. Ambassador Kim, surely this is some kind of joke. Your species has been part of this council for 200 standard years. Kim Tae's expression did not change. This is not a joke, Counselor. Within 72 hours, all human colonies will begin moving to the edge of the galaxy. All human outposts will be abandoned. All human ships will leave Council space. We will complete any existing contracts, but we will not accept any new agreements. The Zephyrian Trade Minister stood up from his seat. His tall, thin body was made of what looked like blue glass. Light seemed to flow through his translucent skin as he spoke. Ambassador Kim, may we ask why you are doing this? Kim Tae looked directly at the Zephyrian. Over the past decades, you have made your feelings very clear. You have told us that humans are too emotional to make good decisions. You have said we are too unpredictable to be trusted with important matters. You have complained that we are too aggressive in our methods. He paused and looked around the chamber at all the different alien faces, mechanical forms, and strange shapes. Perhaps you are correct in your assessment, Kim Tae continued. If our presence causes so much concern, then the logical solution is simple. We will remove ourselves from the situation entirely. A Centaurian representative, who looked like a large insect with multiple arms, began to speak. But Ambassador, the economic disruption this will cause. Kim Tae held up one hand to stop him. The economic impact will be minimal. Human trade represents less than 8% of total galactic commerce. The galaxy functioned before humans joined the Council. It will function after we leave. You have always been very capable of adapting to new situations. The human ambassador gathered his papers and data tablets from the podium. That concludes my statement. Good day to you all. He walked out of the chamber without looking back. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every alien eye, sensor, and detection device followed him as he left. Within hours of Kim Tae's announcement, something remarkable began happening throughout the galaxy. Every human facility started shutting down operations. Space stations that had been operated by humans for decades began closing their docking bays. Colonies that had been home to millions of humans started evacuation procedures. The response from the galactic community was immediate relief. Counselor Vex 9 sent a message to his mechanical collective that same day. Finally, we will no longer have to deal with human intuition disrupting our perfectly calculated projections. Their emotional decision-making process has always been inefficient. The Zephyrian Trade Minister held a private celebration in his quarters. He told his staff, trade negotiations will be much more civilized now. No more human representatives getting angry or upset when discussions become difficult. No more of their strange habit of reading between the lines of what people say. The Kalari delegation sent reports back to their home world stating that galactic affairs would now proceed in a more orderly fashion. The Sorok military leaders were pleased that there would be no more human interference in their territorial disputes. By the end of the first week, the last human transport ship had disappeared beyond the galactic rim. Long-range sensors showed the ships heading toward the empty regions of space where no other species had ever bothered to explore. For the first time in 2 centuries, the galaxy belonged completely to non-human species. The great experiment of multi-species cooperation could now proceed without the unpredictable element that humans had always represented. The aliens congratulated themselves on finally achieving a more rational approach to galactic governance. They looked forward to smoother trade negotiations, more logical military decisions, and better economic planning. None of them noticed that some of their automated systems had already started showing small errors in their programming. None of them realized that certain monitoring stations were beginning to miss important data. None of them understood that the early warning networks they depended on were starting to malfunction without regular human maintenance. The galaxy celebrated its new efficiency while the first cracks in its foundation began to form. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim. Trade Station Omega-7 floated in the darkness of space, its lights blinking in steady patterns. Inside the station, banks of computers and crystal processors worked constantly to analyze trade data from across the galaxy. Senior trade analyst Yoon Hana should have been sitting at her desk reviewing the quarterly reports. But her chair was empty. Her office was dark. Instead, artificial intelligence systems and Vorthack crystal mines were trying to make sense of numbers that did not add up. The reports coming in from all sectors of the galaxy were deeply troubling. Trade efficiency had dropped by 43% in areas where humans used to work. Shipping routes that had run smoothly for decades were now experiencing constant problems and delays. Director Nal Vex of the Galactic Trade Commission stared at the holographic displays showing trade statistics. His tentacles moved nervously as he studied the data. "This cannot be correct," he muttered to himself. "Run the calculations again." The AI systems processed the information for the third time. The results were identical. Trade was failing in ways that made no logical sense. The most disturbing report came from the Kepler Mining Consortium. Director Zalketh, a being made of living crystal, pulsed with frustrated yellow light as he transmitted his findings to the Emergency Council meeting. "We have experienced our worst quarterly loss in over 100 years, Zalketh announced. His voice resonated like musical notes through the communication system. "Our geological surveys show the same mineral deposits as before. Our mining equipment works perfectly. All systems function normally. Yet our ore production has decreased by exactly 41.7%. The other council members listened in confused silence. How could mining operations fail when all the technology worked correctly? What none of them knew was that human miners had possessed skills that could not be measured by machines. Park Jin-woo had worked in the asteroid mines for 25 years. He could walk into a tunnel and immediately sense where the richest ore deposits were located. The scanners might show mineral concentrations, but Jin-woo could feel the tiny gravitational changes and magnetic variations that pointed to the most valuable veins of metal. This knowledge was never written down in official reports. It was passed from one human miner to another through years of experience. A supervisor would take a new worker deep into the mines and teach them to trust their instincts. "Feel the rock," they would say. "Listen to what it tells you." Now the mines were operated entirely by alien workers and automated systems. They could only find the obvious deposits that showed up clearly on scanners. The hidden treasures that human intuition had discovered remained buried in the rock. Similar problems were appearing throughout the galaxy. Shipping routes that humans had optimized through years of experience were now being run by computers that followed only the most basic safety protocols. Travel times increased. Fuel consumption went up. Minor accidents became more frequent. But the real disaster began when the Draxic Republic declared war on the Hellion Federation. The conflict started over what appeared to be a simple trade disagreement. The Hellion Federation had reduced their imports of Draxic manufactured goods by 15%. In response, the Draxic Republic had imposed higher taxes on Hellion merchants. In the past, such disputes had always been resolved through diplomatic meetings. The galactic community had often complained about human diplomats who interfered in these negotiations. They called it human meddling, and said it was unnecessary. Li Min had been the human diplomat assigned to the Draxic-Helian sector. She was a small, quiet woman who had an unusual ability to understand what people were really feeling, even when they came from completely different species. If Li Min had still been at her post, she would have immediately noticed something important about Draxic Ambassador Krell Voter. His scales, which normally showed a steady pattern of blue and green, were flickering between dark purple and angry red. Most aliens would have interpreted this as standard diplomatic aggression. But Li Min would have recognized the specific pattern. She had studied Draxic emotional expressions for years. The particular combination of colors meant deep personal grief mixed with uncontrolled anger. She would have quietly investigated and discovered that Krellvoter's son had died just 2 weeks earlier in a mining accident on the Hellion border worlds. The ambassador was not really angry about trade policies. He was a father grieving for his lost child, and his pain was making him lash out at the nearest target. Li Min would have approached the situation completely differently. Instead of discussing trade numbers, she would have offered condolences for his loss. She might have suggested a moment of silence to honor the mining accident victims. She would have acknowledged his grief before attempting any negotiations. But Li Min was gone. The alien diplomats who replaced her saw only an aggressive ambassador making unreasonable demands. They responded with their own threats and ultimatums. Within 72 hours, Draxic warships were attacking Hellion colonies. The first battle claimed over 50,000 lives. Draxic plasma cannons destroyed 3 Hellion space stations. Hellion fighters responded by bombing Draxic supply depots. As the war spread across multiple star systems, other species began to realize something disturbing. In the past 2 centuries, very few major conflicts had occurred in sectors where humans maintained a diplomatic presence. The galaxy had been remarkably peaceful during the human era. Now, just 6 months after humanity's departure, the first interspecies war in decades had begun. And there was no human diplomat to read between the lines and find the real cause of the conflict. The galaxy was learning that some problems could not be solved by logic alone. Commissioner Thulara sat in her office overlooking the busy traffic lanes around Nexus Prime. Her 8 arms moved independently as she worked on multiple data tablets at once. The Nethek species was known for their ability to multitask, and Thulara was one of the best at managing complex safety operations across the galaxy. A routine report landed on her desk with the designation GSC 7741X. It was just another automated safety audit, the kind that crossed her desk dozens of times each week. She glanced at the summary with 2 of her eyes while her other eyes continued reading different documents. The report showed a concerning pattern. Critical infrastructure failures were increasing in sectors that had previously been under human management. Equipment was breaking down more frequently. Safety systems were experiencing unexplained malfunctions. Monitoring stations were producing incomplete data. Thulara assigned the report to her junior staff. "Investigate these failures," she told them. "The humans are gone now. We need to replace their systems with proper galactic technology." She expected the investigation to be routine. How difficult could it be to maintain systems that humans had operated? The first crisis began in the Andolan system, home to 4 billion gaseous Kalari beings who lived in the atmosphere of the planet Andolan Prime. The planet was beautiful, with swirling clouds of purple and gold gas that served as cities for the floating creatures. Senior Analyst Korth was monitoring routine space traffic when his sensors detected something unusual. A massive asteroid, officially designated KF-4471, had changed its orbit. The rock was enormous, roughly the size of a small moon, and it had been drifting peacefully through space for thousands of years. But a comet had recently passed close to the asteroid. The comet's gravity had nudged KF-4471 just slightly off its previous path. Under normal circumstances, this would not have mattered. The asteroid would simply drift in a new direction through empty space. Korth ran the calculations 3 times before he believed the results. The asteroid was now on a direct collision course with Andolan Prime. Impact would occur in exactly 18 months. "This cannot be correct," Korth muttered, his insect-like mandibles clicking nervously. He ran the orbital mechanics program again, using different parameters. The result was identical. 4 billion Kalari were going to die unless someone stopped a mountain-sized piece of rock traveling at incredible speed through space. Commissioner Thulara received the emergency alert while she was sleeping. All 8 of her arms jerked awake at once as the priority alarm sounded in her quarters. Within minutes, she was in her office reviewing Korth's findings. "Contact the Galactic Defense Force immediately," she ordered. "We need their largest deflection systems deployed to the Andolan system." Defense Coordinator Kextal arrived at the emergency meeting looking confident. His species, the Maxaloth, were known as excellent military planners. Their ship designs were efficient and their weapons were precise. "We can handle this situation," Kextal announced. "Our deflection systems can alter the course of any asteroid that threatens inhabited worlds." But when the Defense Force ships arrived at KF-4471, they discovered a serious problem. The asteroid was 3 times larger than anything in their contingency plans. Their deflection beams were designed for rocks that were big enough to destroy cities, not entire planets. "How is this possible?" Kextal demanded during an emergency conference call. Our monitoring system should have detected this threat years ago. We should have had time to prepare proper countermeasures. Commissioner Thullare was asking herself the same question. The Galactic Safety Commission maintained monitoring stations throughout every inhabited system. How had they missed tracking such a dangerous object? It was Senior Analyst Korth who found the answer buried deep in archived maintenance records. The files were old and had been marked as routine upkeep, rather than important safety data. For the past 47 years, a small human observation post had been tracking KF 4471's trajectory with incredible precision. The post was officially listed as a minor research station, and had never appeared in any major reports. The station had been operated by engineer Choi Hae-jin, a quiet woman who had spent her entire career studying asteroid movements. Every few months she had applied tiny course corrections to KF 4471 using small gravity generators. The adjustments were so minor that they never appeared in official safety reports. Korth found her final log entry made just days before the human evacuation: course correction complete. Next adjustment required in 15.7 months. Asteroid will remain in safe trajectory for next 200 years if regular maintenance continues. There would be no next adjustment. Choi Hae-jin was gone along with all the other humans. The observation post was abandoned and drifting dark in space. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Korth began searching through other archived records, looking for similar patterns of human involvement in safety systems. What he found made Commissioner Thullare's 8 arms tremble with shock. Humans had been secretly maintaining 17 different cosmic threats throughout the galaxy. They had been containing a temporal distortion in the Rigel sector that could have disrupted time itself across 40 light-years of space. They had been monitoring an ancient alien defense grid that automatically destroyed any ship that came too close. Most terrifying of all, they had been regularly cleaning a self-replicating computer virus from the galactic communication networks. The virus was designed by an extinct species to destroy any civilization that reached a certain level of technology. Without human maintenance, it was already beginning to spread again. They never told us, Commissioner Thullare whispered as she reviewed file after file of human safety operations. They were protecting the entire galaxy, and they never said a single word about it. The galaxy was learning that humans had been more than diplomatic representatives or trade partners. They had been silent guardians, watching over cosmic threats that could destroy entire civilizations. And now they were gone. The Great Council Hall on Nexus Prime had never seen such panic. Representatives from hundreds of species filled every seat, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of fear. Clicking, humming, electronic beeping, and telepathic static filled the air as the emergency session began. 18 months had passed since humanity left the galaxy. What had started as relief and celebration had turned into the greatest crisis in galactic history. Counselor Vex 9 of the Mechanical Collective stood at the central podium, his metal body reflecting the emergency lighting. His voice, usually calm and calculated, carried notes of desperation that no one had ever heard from his species before. The Centauri system faces complete destruction in exactly 60 standard days, he announced. 43 billion beings across 7 worlds will die unless we find a solution immediately. The asteroid swarm had appeared without warning 6 weeks earlier. It was not a single large rock like the one that had threatened Andalon Prime. Instead, it was a cluster of thousands of metallic fragments, each one the size of a building, all traveling together at tremendous speed. The swarm had been created when an ancient moon in an uninhabited system had been torn apart by gravitational forces. The debris had been flung into space in a deadly cloud that was now heading straight for the most populated system in the galaxy. Defense Coordinator Kextal stood up slowly from his seat. The proud military leader looked like he had aged years in the past few weeks. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone who knew he was facing an impossible task. Our deflection systems cannot handle a threat of this size, he admitted to the assembly. We can destroy individual asteroids, but there are too many pieces spread across too wide an area. Our weapons would need to fire continuously for months to stop them all. A representative of the crystalline Vortex species pulsed with frustrated orange light. How did we not see this coming? Our sensors monitor every system in the galaxy. Kextal's shoulders sagged. The humans would have detected this threat while it was still forming. Their deep space monitoring networks were somehow superior to ours. They would have tracked the moon's destabilization and prevented the breakup from occurring. It was true. Engineers like Nam Sujin and Bei Dongho had maintained a network of sensor stations throughout the galaxy. These stations were officially listed as research outposts in galactic records, but they had actually been early warning systems designed to detect cosmic threats while they were still manageable. The human engineers had constantly modified and improved their sensors, adding new detection methods and upgrading old equipment. They had tracked gravitational anomalies, monitored stellar radiation patterns, and watched for signs of planetary instability. But when humanity evacuated, they had taken all their specialized knowledge with them. The sensor stations had been abandoned, their equipment slowly degrading without maintenance. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades began producing false readings or missing crucial data entirely. The Centauri asteroid swarm had formed in a region that human sensors would have been monitoring closely. Nam Sujin would have detected the moon's orbital decay months before the breakup occurred. She would have sent automated probes to stabilize the moon's orbit, preventing the disaster entirely. But Nam Sujin was gone along with all the other human engineers. The early warning that could have saved 43 billion lives had never come. The news from the Outer Rim was even more devastating. Ambassador Krell Thane of the Hellion Federation stood with visible difficulty, his normally bright blue skin now pale with exhaustion. The Vorthan Empire has begun what they call a purification campaign, he announced. They are systematically destroying 3 neighboring species. Entire worlds have been sterilized. Billions are dead. The Vorthans were a cold, logical species who believed in the superiority of organized civilization. They had always considered their neighboring species to be inferior and chaotic. In the past, they had limited themselves to economic pressure and diplomatic isolation. But with humans gone, the Vorthans had become bolder. Emperor Zexmore had declared that inferior species served no purpose in an optimally ordered galaxy. His fleets had begun attacking worlds inhabited by the Kelthani, the Druax, and the Yilleran peoples. "Why are they doing this now?" asked the Centaurian representative. "The Vorthans have coexisted with these species for centuries." The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Velnara of the Galactic Patrol had been studying historical records of human merchant activities. She had discovered something that shocked even her. "The humans were deterring this aggression without us realizing it," she explained. Captain Li Sujin of the merchant vessel Stellar Hope had been making regular trade runs through Vorthan space for 20 years. Her ship was officially listed as a commercial trader, but our records show it carried enough defensive weapons to fight a small war. Li Sujin had never fired those weapons. She had never needed to. Her reputation as someone who would fight to protect innocent people had been enough to make the Vorthans think twice about their expansion plans. But Li Sujin was gone now. The Stellar Hope had disappeared with the rest of humanity. The invisible deterrent that had kept the peace in the Outer Rim for decades no longer existed. Similar patterns were emerging throughout the galaxy. Human merchants, diplomats, and engineers had been quietly preventing disasters and conflicts while the rest of the galactic community remained unaware. They had been the galaxy's immune system, protecting against threats that others never even noticed. They had worked in the shadows, asking for no recognition and receiving no thanks. Now the galaxy was learning what it meant to face the universe without their protection. The systems were failing, the threats were multiplying, and time was running out. The emergency session continued through the night, but no solutions were found. The galaxy that had celebrated humanity's departure was now facing its own extinction. The emergency communication center on Nexus Prime buzzed with frantic activity. Every transmission array, every long-range communications dish, every quantum relay was focused on a single desperate mission. For 3 straight days, technicians from dozens of species had been working around the clock to establish contact with humanity. The galaxy was dying and only the humans could save it. Communications Officer Zelkara, a tall being with 4 arms and silver skin, monitored the arrays with growing desperation. Her people had been sending messages toward the Galactic Rim for 72 hours without any response. The humans had vanished so completely that it seemed they had never existed at all. On the 4th day something changed. A single transmission began coming through on the emergency diplomatic frequency. Zelkara's hands shook as she routed the signal to the main council chamber. The voice that emerged from the speakers was human, but it carried none of the warmth that had characterized previous human communications. It was cold, clinical, and utterly without emotion. "This is Dr. On G1 speaking for the Human Coalition. We acknowledge your request for assistance." A collective sigh of relief swept through the packed council chamber. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered for this moment. Finally, after months of disasters and failures, humanity was responding to their calls for help. However, Dr. On continued, and the single word made every alien heart sink: we must decline. The silence that followed was so complete that the soft humming of the station's life support system seemed thunderously loud. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The word decline echoed in their minds like a death sentence. Counselor Vex 9 of the Mechanical Collective was the first to find his voice. His usually steady electronic tones carried a strain that no one had ever heard from his species before. But the Centauri system, he began, his mechanical hands gripping the edge of his speaking platform. 43 billion lives will be lost in 57 days. Surely you cannot mean to let them all die. Dr. On's response came without hesitation or emotion. Those lives are not our responsibility. You made that very clear when you celebrated our departure 18 months ago. Commissioner Thulare stood up so quickly that all 8 of her arms knocked over the data tablets on her desk. Her voice was high and desperate as she spoke into the communications system. We were wrong, she cried. We acknowledge our mistakes. We did not understand what you were doing for us. Please, the ancient defense grid in the galactic core is destroying our ships. Our trade routes are cut off. Our economy is collapsing. Dr. On's voice remained maddeningly calm and precise. The defense grid is precisely the kind of problem you accused us of creating through our so-called paranoid infrastructure projects. You questioned why we built redundant safety systems. You complained about our unnecessary monitoring stations. You wondered why we always seemed to be preparing for disasters that never happened. There was a pause before she continued. They never happened because we prevented them. The Zephyrian trade minister, his translucent blue skin flickering with patterns of shame, stepped forward. Dr. On, I personally said that commerce would be more civilized without human involvement. I was wrong. I did not understand. You understood perfectly, Dr. On interrupted. You understood that human methods seemed unpredictable to you. You understood that our emotional responses made you uncomfortable. You understood that our constant preparations for unlikely disasters seemed wasteful and paranoid. Ambassador Krellvoter of the Draxic Republic had remained silent throughout the exchange. His scales, normally a proud mixture of green and gold, had shifted to deep blue with grief. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The war between my people and the Hellion Federation. Could you have prevented it? For the first time, Dr. On's voice softened slightly. Diplomat Li Min would have recognized your emotional state immediately. She would have known that you were grieving for your son who died in the mining accident. She would have offered condolences before any negotiations began. She would have suggested a memorial ceremony to honor all the accident victims. Krellvoter's scales darkened to black. My son, how did you know? Because Li Min made it her business to know. She understood that most conflicts have deeper causes than the surface issues that people argue about. The trade dispute was never really about trade. It was about your pain and your need for someone to acknowledge your loss. The Draxic ambassador collapsed into his seat, his massive frame shaking with sobs. Millions are dead because I could not control my grief. Dr. On's voice became clinical again. Millions are dead because the galaxy chose to remove the people who understood how to prevent such tragedies. Defense Coordinator Kextal stood up, his proud military bearing completely gone. Dr. On, please. We will give you anything you ask for. Territory, resources, technology. Just help us save the Centauri system. You have nothing we want, came the immediate reply. We are quite comfortable at the Galactic Rim, thank you. We have found several uninhabited systems that are perfect for our needs. We no longer require galactic civilization. The finality in her voice was terrifying. It was clear that humanity had not just left the galaxy physically. They had emotionally disconnected from the species they had once protected. Dr. On's final transmission came 6 hours later, broadcast on all emergency frequencies throughout the galaxy. You wanted us gone, so we left. You celebrated our departure as progress toward a more rational, civilized galaxy. Now you have what you asked for. The galaxy belongs to you now. The Centauri asteroid swarm will impact in 56 days. The precursor defense grid will continue destroying your ships indefinitely. The Vorthan Empire will expand their purification campaign until someone stops them. The computer virus in your networks will corrupt all your data within months. These are your problems now. Solve them yourselves. The communication ended with a soft click, leaving the galaxy to face its destiny alone.